Coming up today, pressure is mounting on the floor leader of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party to resign. Members loyal to the president say Yoo Seong-min should step down for his role in endorsing a controversial revised parliamentary bill. Delegates from the 57 founding members of the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank are signing their articles of agreement that decide each member's share and the bank's initial capital. Korea will hold a 3.8% stake. Plus, the Greek debt crisis deepens even further as Greece shuts its banks and imposes capital controls after the European Central Bank turns off the tap. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 29th of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with the leadership crisis gripping Korea's ruling Saenuri Party. The party's floor leader, Yoo Seong-min, is coming under intense pressure to step down from pro-Park Geun-hye figures within the party. They want him to quit over his decision to work together with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy on a controversial National Assembly law which was vetoed by the president last week. Knowing the presidential office was opposed to it, Yoo had conceded to the NPAD's demand to revise the law as a precondition to passing the bill to reform the debt-ridden pension system for government employees. Now, Supreme Council members loyal to the president plan to hold a meeting this afternoon to discuss whether Yoo should remain in the job. Yoo apologized to President Park over the weekend for causing friction between the ruling party and the presidential office. President Park vetoed the revised law last Thursday, saying it violated the constitutional separation of powers, as lawmakers would have been able to request changes to government ordinances. Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye had nothing more to say about the fate of the ruling party floor leader at a meeting of her senior secretaries this morning. The president, who took direct aim at Yoo Seong-min before vetoing the disrupted parliamentary bill at last week's cabinet meeting, instead focused on boosting the economy in the wake of the MERS outbreak, calling for decisive measures to encourage spending and other economic activities to bring the country back to normal. President Park stressed time is of the essence in executing the government's recently announced economic revitalization and reform policies for the latter half of this year. The president also urged officials to speed up deregulation efforts to encourage both investment and job creation. Now, moving on to the latest regarding the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome here in Korea, and no new cases were reported for a second consecutive day on Monday. For the first time this has happened in over a month. Health Ministry officials say this may be an indication that the outbreak may be on the wane. The number of people diagnosed with the disease is holding steady at 182, and the death toll also remains unchanged. Of those who have been diagnosed, 57 people remain in hospital, with 14 of them currently in critical condition. The remaining 93 have been discharged from hospitals after making full recoveries. Meanwhile, there are still nearly 2,700 people in isolation for possible infection. That's as of today, and it's up by more than 100 from the previous day. Officials are still keeping a close eye on two hospitals, Samsung Medical Center and Kangdong Sacred Heart Hospital, both seen as epicenters of the disease. The South Korean Navy held a commemorative event this Monday marking the 13th anniversary of the second Yeonpyeong sea battle between the two Koreas, which left 6 South Korean sailors dead and 18 others injured. Now, the ceremony, hosted by the Navy Chief of Staff, was attended by some 500 people, including families of the victims and government officials. Seoul's Defense Minister Han Min-gu gave a speech at the event where he vowed to sternly retaliate against any provocations from North Korea. He also promised to pour all of his efforts to uphold the spirit of the fallen soldiers. The Second Battle of Yeonpyeong broke out on June 29, 2002, when two North Korean patrol boats crossed the maritime border in the West Sea and launched a preemptive attack on a South Korean Navy boat. Now, Greece's days in the Eurozone and possibly the European Union could be numbered as the debt crisis has taken yet another turn for the worse. With its international creditors closing the door to a bailout extension, the Greek Prime Minister has confirmed that banks will be shut on Monday and capital controls will be imposed. Han has the details.
Greece's nightmare is fast becoming reality after the EU, European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund rejected the troubled nation's request for an extension of its bailout program. As multiple sets of debt repayment due dates draw ever closer and with no money by which to pay them, Greeks have been rushing to ATMs to withdraw their savings, fearing the worst after Parliament's surprise referendum call on the creditors' take-it-or-leave-it bailout terms. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has announced that banks will be shut on Monday while capital controls be imposed. The country's stock exchange will also be closed on Monday.
This decision led the European Central Bank today to limit the liquidity of Greek banks and force the Central Bank of Greece to suggest a bank holiday and a restriction on bank withdrawals.
Tsipras blamed the creditors and strongly denounced their move to reject the bailout extension. He said it had no other purpose but to blackmail the Greek people and obstruct the smooth democratic process of the referendum set for July 5th. But he assured the people that their money is safe.
The citizens' deposits in the Greek banks are absolutely secure. Equally safe is the payment of salaries and pensions. Any difficulties that might be presented must be dealt with calm and determination.
He did not give details of how long banks would stay closed or exactly what controls on capital will be imposed. He repeated his request for a bailout extension beyond Tuesday's deadline, when Greece has to pay the IMF some $1.8 billion in loan repayments. Despite the worsening situation in Greece, local experts say the Korean economy should be able to weather the storm. They say Seoul has been preparing for the worst-case scenario, so the impact will likely be smaller than it might have been 4 years ago when fears of a so-called Grexit were raised for the first time. Han, Arirang News.
China is celebrating a milestone in its foreign policy today as member nations sign a formal charter for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in Beijing. The organisation will begin operations early next year. Yoo Seong-min reports.
Representatives from 57 founding nations gathered in Beijing's Great Hall of the People on Monday for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank's signing ceremony. It's one of China's biggest foreign policy achievements yet. As its name implies, the bank was set up to provide loans to finance infrastructure projects in developing Asian countries, and it's expected to have a positive influence on the Asian economy. Seoul's finance ministry said the demand for Asia's infrastructure financing is expected to reach $730 billion annually, with an average of over $230 billion set to be spent on infrastructure projects in Asia. Asian countries will own up to 75% of the institution, while European countries and other nations will take up the rest. China has the largest stake at 30%, while India is the second largest shareholder at 8.5%. Korea is the fourth largest shareholder within the region, and it's the largest share the country has ever had in any global financial organization, including the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. However, among the 57 total nations, Germany outpaces Korea in percentage of shares and voting rights. The organization will start with $50 billion in authorized capital, which is eventually expected to double in size. The bank's interim head will be China's former Deputy Finance Minister, Jin Lichun. Ahead of the signing ceremony, China vowed to operate a transparent, socially conscious development bank that will supplement the shortfall in Asian infrastructure funding and cooperate with existing multilateral organizations. Yoo Seong-min, Arirang News.
Now, it has emerged that the issue of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula was an unexpected stumbling block for South Korea and the US before the two countries signed their revised civilian nuclear energy cooperation agreement earlier this month. Jang Sun-hung, president of Handong University and a nuclear safety expert who took part in the negotiations, says the US called on the South Korean delegation to reflect the joint declaration of the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula right up until the final stages of the negotiations. The declaration, signed by the two Koreas all the way back in 1992, is supposed to prohibit plutonium reprocessing and uranium enrichment. Now, Jang went on to say that he sensed Washington had suspicions Seoul might start nuclear weapons development, and it wanted South Korea's nuclear technicians to develop their technology in a transparent way. The Korean government says the United States did not file for permission to ship anthrax samples to Korea, including a shipment of live anthrax sent here by accident back in May. That's according to the group Minbyun, or Lawyers for Democratic Society, which made the statement following a request to Korea's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Trade Ministry for information about this shipment. Now, the Pentagon admitted last month that it had mistakenly sent live anthrax samples to labs around the world, including the Osan Air Base here in South Korea. The CDC said the health ministry hadn't approved the shipment because the US Army had never filed a request, which is required under Korean law. The CDC added, however, that it did receive documents from the US Army outlining how to dispose of the samples once the mistake was caught. Now, despite the lingering economic uncertainties around the world, Korea's economic growth over the past decade or so has remained relatively strong in comparison to that of other members of the OECD. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Korea came in at 6th place out of 34 member countries in terms of economic growth rate, growing at an average of 3.7% per year during the period between 2005 and 2014, according to data released by the OECD on Monday. That's 2.5 times higher than the OECD average of 1.5%. Chile ranked first on the list with an average annual expansion of 4.2% during the same period, followed by Turkey, Israel, Poland, and Slovakia. Australia and Mexico came behind Korea in 7th and 8th places, respectively. The latest figure for Korea represents an outstanding performance for the country when compared to countries with a per capita GDP exceeding $30,000. The top 6 countries on the list, with the exception of Korea and Israel, all had a per capita GDP in the $20,000 range. Also, unlike many OECD members that suffered a period of weak or negative growth right after the 2008 global financial crisis, Korea remained relatively stable. Korea recorded the lowest fall among the top 6 countries on the list from 2009 to 2014. Financial experts say now it's time for Korea to come up with a new economic policy while simultaneously pushing for structural reforms as the period of rapid economic growth for the country has come to an end. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, more Koreans are borrowing from the bank as the country's outstanding household loans in May climbed by $6.5 billion on month. This is according to the Financial Supervisory Service, which attributed the increase in loans to the record low key interest rate, which encouraged more households to purchase homes. The total amount of household debt now stands at roughly $477 billion. However, the margin of increase in household debt last month posted a slight decrease from April. Most goods are more expensive when they're sold outside their country of origin, with taxes and shipping charges inevitably being reflected in the price tag. But recent surveys have shown that prices for some goods are higher in Korea than anywhere else in the world. Kim Min-ji has more.
Zara is one of the most popular fast fashion brands in Korea. The company's clothing is loved for its high quality, modern style, and relatively low prices. But as affordable as it may be, a recent study comparing some 7,000 items on websites in several countries showed that people in Korea are actually paying a lot more than customers in other countries.
Item prices at Zara stores in Korea are nearly double that of Spain, the birthplace of the company. That means the fashion retailer's prices are more expensive in Korea than anywhere else in the world.
IKEA has also been at the center of controversy after a survey showed its products are priced higher in Korea than in the United States, Germany, and Japan. The poll compared over 100 sofas and storage units on the Swedish furniture makers' websites for each of the countries and found that the average cost was $476 in Korea, $85 more than in Japan. Although the studies don't take purchasing power into account, Korea still stands out from the rest.
It's true there's a higher pricing structure in Korea, but it's also due to the monopolistic structure of distribution channels. Korean outlets are also responsible for greater initial expenses that go into everything from marketing to infrastructure to raise awareness of foreign brands.
In addition, Korean consumers tend to prefer goods with higher price tags, so the demand has also played a part.
Koreans tend to care about what others think, so they buy items even if they're expensive. I think this is what's keeping prices up in Korea.
It's a vicious cycle. I know prices are lower overseas, but it's not like I can go abroad every now and then.
Experts say distribution channels need to be diversified and more needs to be done to promote parallel imports and direct purchasing in order to root out unfair pricing strategies. They also call on consumer agencies to provide consumers with information on prices so they can compare and seek new channels. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And those were the stories we've been following on this Monday afternoon in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Goodbye.